So I am here today with my good friends over at That's For You. That's For You.
That was that for us. Walk to Cinema Podcast.
Thank you for joining me. Today we are talking about, I said this earlier, it's potentially a Mount Rushmore film for me. I know I'm going to build this up a lot, but we were talking about a Charlie Kauffman written movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really care who the director is, even though I love him to death too. We were talking about Adaptation here.
True.
So this, again, I've already said, I absolutely adore this movie. I would like to know what my guests have to say about it.
I love it. I mean, I love Kauffman in general. I don't even know if this is his best movie. It's his best written but not directed movie. I say that.
I think it's his most ambitious by far.
It's insane that he decided to put this out to the company. Because I know he wrote it without no one knowing. Yeah. And I don't know if I would have the balls to show it to anyone because this is kind of like insane.
Yeah, so we should probably at least give somewhat of a backstory to this movie. Because if you don't know, there is context needed to be given for this movie. Which was funny because what I was saying earlier, I watched this movie twice. So I watched it once to prepare for this. And then I kept on remembering, I hyped up this movie to my mom because it has Nick Cage in it, who she loves, and Meryl Streep, who she also loves. So I was like, you know what, Mom? Let's watch this movie. It's about time. But let me tell you what the movie's about. So it's about Charlie Kauffman, who you may know. He wrote Being John Malkovich, wrote Synecdoche, New York, and some other stuff now. It's a lot of ambitious stuff. So he was asked to adapt this book called The Orchid Thief. And it's very, it's known for being an impossible book to really adapt just because the way that she, rambles on, which they refer to in the movie a few times. But this is his screenplay that he turned in when he couldn't figure out what to write for the screenplay for The Orchid Thief. So he wrote himself into his own script and turned it into something entirely different.
Genius. Meta.
Yeah, so this would probably go down as as meta as a movie can be.
Yeah. And it's meta about Hollywood, it's meta about screenwriting, it's just so good.
Yeah, this is the go-to movie, I would say, for anybody that's into screenwriting.
Yeah. Don't write the three, is that what it's called? That's the message of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Don't write a thriller where someone has multiple personalities.
I had to remember the name of that for a sec. So what my theory was, the reason this is also an added layer to why I showed it to my mom, was I was like, okay, I'm not going to tell my mom anything about this movie, and I want to see if she likes it because of the third act, because it is referenced in this movie. Brian Cox's character is this screenplay coach, and he just says, "Look, man, just wow him in the third act, and you'll have a hit." My mom absolutely loved this movie after the third act.
See, the third act was probably my least favorite part.
I agree.
But I understand why he did it. He did it to that's the joke, kind of. Yeah, that's the joke.
That's the punchline.
That's when he's like, okay, I'm gonna make it structured, cliched, and just fit into what Hollywood expects of a standard screenplay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's still the least enjoyable, but it makes a lot of sense with the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I would say it's the least enjoyable part of the movie, even though, I know it has to be part of the movie.
Yeah.
But I just really enjoy those first two acts, which is hard to do in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very, I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of it the first time I saw it. We saw it maybe a year.
Yeah, it was a year
ago. And I thought it was really well done. And I, got all that I was supposed to, but I was like, maybe I wasn't in the mood for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's a lot of things that go into it.
Well, you're not a huge Kauffman overall.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but the second time watching it, we just watched it very recently. I liked it a lot more. I thought it was really funny. There's a lot of humor in the script.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And Nicolas Cage really, brings it.
Yeah, and Nick Cage obviously is just a perfect for this role.
He's also perfect, I mean, overall.
Yeah. It's unfortunate this came out the same year as The Pianist, because The Pianist just kind of won every award that year. Because this
well, this couldn't win over The Pianist. That's a Hollywood banger right there.
Yeah, that's just tough. That's tough luck.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have a screenplay nomination for somebody that doesn't exist. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
It exists in our hearts.
Yeah, there's so many lines in this movie that just like really stuck out with me. Where like I was like, I'm glad I have notes of this because I'm like, oh wow, that's a banger line. Like back and like every time I just like watch this movie, I get a new line. Like the easiest one that I just love, and it's so simple, is just like when he's writing and he's like, I need to establish the themes, and then the themes of the movie get established right afterwards.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff that's just like, wow, you really went off.
Well, I mean, the way he wrote this screenplay, I know he was suffering from writer's block, and so he put that, in the screenplay, talking about how he's suffering from writer's block, and like that's kind of like what they tell you to do when you're trying to write, is just to write all of your thoughts down, no matter how stupid or silly they
just
are.
Go off.
Just
as long as you write, something will come out.
Yeah, like just continually writing. Don't try to format anything. Just write. Just get it out. Mm-hmm. And then I feel like he did that and then just kept everything.
Yeah.
He's like, I can use this.
Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, it's as personal as it gets.
Yeah. I love some of the moments where he's like psyching himself into like, oh, I'm writing something so profound and exciting, and it's about like flowers and stuff. Like he has those moments where he like picks up the tape recorder and he just starts screaming. He's like, oh, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. Then he realizes he looks at it later and he's like, oh, that's not going to cut it.
That happens, though. I feel like I've written stuff that I think it's great, and then when I look back at it, I'm like, oh, God, why would I do that? Delete.
Yeah, I mean, this movie has just, like, obviously, like, it's super dense when it comes to its themes. I just like how it talks about just film analysis. Like this movie honestly just covers like why I like movies. It's I know it's like a really simple thing to say, but it's just like, oh, that's what I don't like in a movie, and look how they refer to that. I love it. Yeah,
it kind of refers and uses Donald as like what's wrong with Hollywood screenwriting at the time, that they just want this type of movie with all the twists and doesn't even make any sense if you think about it, but Hollywood loves it, eats it up.
I feel like The Three kind of reminds me of like a Christopher Nolan movie, to be honest.
Tenet.
Like Christopher Nolan with M. Night Shyamalan, they can make that up.
Yeah, there's just like twist. There's a twist. Here's a twist.
I can't believe he wrote himself to be like that disgusting too. Like
he's very honest.
Like I'm sure he turned that in, and then he was like, man, nobody's gonna look at me the same. Not just because of like what I like, just how I just massacred this woman's script in her book, but I just made myself like the most disgusting man.
Yeah, he literally puts it in like Charlie Kaufman looks disgusting and fat and
fat,
bald,
ugly.
Yeah, and he's fantasizes about like these people he finds attractive.
Yeah, he just really wants to bang the writer.
Yeah.
Like he's so awkward just around women in this movie. Then like it'll show him being awkward, then it just immediately cuts to himself like in bed thinking about him.
Yeah, it's the most ballsy move you could make. I can't think of anything more personal than just writing about how gross you are and then giving it to your production company to make a movie out of.
Yeah, I definitely don't think I could do that.
I'm not going to put all my details out there.
Yeah, I remember that elevator scene with Susan really kind of hit me, where he's like literally like crawled up in the corner. It was just like, okay, come on, dude. Like, regardless of how awkward you are, you just flew all the way out here, and shows how like he really just can't do it.
Yeah. It's just, he says it himself. He's weak and cowardly.
Yeah,
and that's, I don't know, he uses the brother character as kind of like the person that's not scared to do the things he can't do, including writing shitty screenplays that would make him money, but he just doesn't like.
Donald has one of my favorite lines of the movie when he's like sitting next to Maggie Gyllenhaal, and he just looks at his brother. He's just like, "You think she's hot, bro?" God, like it's got to be frustrating.
She's really funny in this.
Yeah, I love her in this. Like,
yeah, she's really funny.
Yeah,
it's like the agreeable girlfriend.
Like y'all just got something crazy going up in your brains, man. Y'all are just a factory of intrigue.
This is such a perfect storm of a movie, I feel. Because the book itself, like the story of the book is interesting, and then Charlie Kaufman does all this talking about himself, but he also makes it really funny. And then we have Nicolas Cage that pulls it off completely. And Spike Jonze also, like, he has to be given credit. I know you don't want to give him credit.
Oh, no, I love him. It's just more so, like, I know when, like, Charlie Kaufman's attached to it, I'm like, well, you got a pretty easy job now.
Yeah. Well, you got a lot out of Nick Cage, though, because he played the main character in a way that you really wouldn't tell an actor to do his job. He's kind of like, keeping his inside voice in a lot of the dialogue. Mm-hmm. It really projects his voice when he's doing the voiceover. Yeah, there's just a lot of untypical behavior for a main actor in a movie. Yeah, that Spike Jonze wanted to get out of him.
Yeah, this reminds me of kind of like Jake Gyllenhaal's performance from Enemy. Not obviously like that's a little more like quiet, but it's really easy to just be like, oh, they're playing duos and they're playing opposites, and oh, they changed the costumes so they're different and all this. Like this does feel like it's a really nuanced duo performance from them or from him. He's not.
Yeah, it feels like two people.
Yeah, like it really can't.
Even
be
though
understated.
A world with two Nick Cages is a perfect world, but I'll settle for an adaptation with two Nick Cages.
Did you kind of vibe at all with like the overarching theme of adapting? Because I know the first time that I watched this movie, I was kind of like, why are they showing like evolution, and then why are they showing like these flowers at the end?
Yeah, there's a lot of variations on the meaning of adaptation. Adapting the book, the flowers adapting to their environment, and humans adapting to new conditions, and him adapting to just coming to himself and realize that maybe he's even worse than what he thinks he is, but turns out he's not. He's great. He's the best American filmmaker of the century.
Yeah, I love how he has to like. He kind of has to realize that he does have to make like an artistic sacrifice, because that is part of the movie, like saying like, oh, well, you can't make your perfect screenplay every time. You do have to make concessions. Just hopefully not as bad as like a Donald Kaufman script.
Yeah, he really didn't want to accept that he needed the structure at some point, but then eventually, I mean, we see a struggle to accept that. He does need change. He does need structure, because that's kind of how movies work, I guess. They don't have to, but most movies that don't follow structure, it's either love or hate, They're never too successful. They're just... I don't know. A lot of people do hate those unstructured movies that just kind of go along with the flow. Mm-hmm. And I understand, but I don't... This was perfect, though. It really is. Yeah. I really love the change from just going along with him to then having the structure. It's just kind of in a joking way. Mm.
Yeah. I don't know. My whole thing about this movie was I was thinking of Susan Orlean, who is the writer of The Orchid Thief, and just what her reaction must have been at the time when she read the screenplay.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of like reading about her reaction to this film, and I do know that at the beginning when she first got handed the script and she read it, she was like, absolutely not. Just no. And then, I think it took a little bit of convincing. Like, everybody else said yes, you're the only person.
I mean, by now she's got to be happy. Yeah. This is a masterpiece.
Yeah, she did an interview, I forget with who, but I think it was in 2020, talking about how her 15-year-old son finally wanted to watch the movie. And so it was like her husband, and her 15-year-old son watching the movie. And she's like, at the end, my son was like, so is any of that last part true? Like,
John
did you...
my dad?
Yeah, like
Well, not even just the last part or just even about her, but the overall movie, if you don't know anything about anyone in it, is like, is this true? What part is fiction?
Yeah,
It's a little blurred, the lines.
from my knowledge, what convinced her was that nobody was forcing her. Apparently, everybody was just like, "Look, this is crazy. Like, we understand if you say no." And she was apparently kind of empowered by it and was like,
yeah.
"Oh, let's do it. If we had the right people, we can do this."
And they had the right people.
Yeah, she got Meryl Streep to play her in the movie, so
That's like
that's probably
dream.
a win
That's
for
a
her.
bucket list.
Yeah. If you're a middle-aged woman and you get Meryl Streep to play you, you're good.
Yeah.
Even though, I'm not a big Meryl Streep fan.
I feel like I'm too young.
I think she does well.
I feel like every time like I say that, somebody's like, "Well, it's because you haven't seen this movie that nobody really cares about anymore from 40 years ago."
It's not about her acting, really. I don't like her personality. Her acting's fine. Sophie's Choice is good.
Julia and Julia. The Devil Wears Prada.
No.
Those are more my Meryl Streep movies.
I like that one with Alec Baldwin. It's like a middle-aged rom-com about divorcees. I can't think of the name of it.
Oh, yeah. It's complicated.
Yeah, I like that one for some reason.
Yeah, the when I finished this movie, the one thing I was like wanting to think about, I was like, wonder how many times I've realistically been convinced by a third act. And I started going through my movies, and I was like, you know what? I need to dock some movies down because I didn't enjoy these parts and these parts. It definitely like makes you more critical of movies.
That's true. I think that, sometimes I'll give movies ratings higher than I originally thought I was going to because of the third act.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I do that. I mean, everyone does that.
Yeah.
I watched the Polish movie the other day that has like 500 logs on Letterboxd, whatever, but I was going to give it like a 7, and then the final act was so good, I gave it an 8. Because it is true that the third act captures you, and that's what you leave the movie with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important to capture the attention in the third act, but it can also really dilute your project and your like idea of what your screenplay is going to be, because you feel like you need to grab people's attention.
And it can also work in the opposite way where you leave a sour taste in people's mouth. Like I know for me, like that's how I felt about like the Squid Game show, where I really disliked the ending, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I've been betrayed by this show that I thought I liked.
Yeah, I felt the same way about How I Met Your Mother. That ending episode was crushing to me.
In a more cinematic way, because you guys love TV. I think that a lot of people felt that with Power of the Dog.
Okay.
And that's like part of the hate it got. Just like a recent example of a movie that did it wrong in people's eyes. I don't think it did, but...
Yeah, so
I don't think it did either.
One thing that I said after Adaptation, like I remember tweeting this, I was like, is it sad if I kind of say I relate to this movie?
A little.
And I was like, I gotta relate to this movie. I was like,
I don't really relate to anything Kauffman writes, but I always love it, and that's kind of his power. I don't need to relate.
Yeah,
I think...
You can go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the part of the reason I don't love Kauffman is because I can't relate. And I think that Adaptation, for me, I haven't seen all of his movies, but I feel like a movie that he wrote that feels similar to Adaptation for me is Anomalisa, where it's, about this, like, man that feels, I guess, inadequate,
Yeah.
And everybody around him is, like, judging him or,
Yeah. He feels like he's more than what he is. Because people don't really care about you that much. But you trick yourself into thinking that everyone's judging you, and it's not true.
And I don't particularly like Anomalisa, but I like...
I love Anomalisa,
I know
too.
you do. That's, like, one of the movies we argue about, I think. On, like, whether we think it's good or not.
Yeah. Like, there are parts to this where I do relate, where, like, you watch people, like, kind of go through life in a very easy way, and they get successful, and you're like, wow, I'm trying this hard to make, like I'm trying to do this and this and this, and other people just go through it with ease.
Yeah, sure.
There are definitely some other points. Like, I think you can relate to this movie pretty well without even being like a writer of any sort.
I mean, I think there's something for everyone. I mean, everyone gets insecure at some point, and everyone sees other people around them doing worse things, but that everyone else seems to like more. I think that's where Donald comes in, right? It's like his reflection on, why do people like this crap? And I'm trying so hard to make the best movie ever, and I just can't.
So well.
And everyone around me is doing shitty thrillers, just doing Panic Room, and they're getting successful.
Yeah, honestly, maybe Panic Room had a little influence on this. We don't know.
We don't.
Maybe he didn't like it. So have you guys seen Succession?
No.
Because I just finished like watching it all, and Brian Cox is like obviously like one of the main dudes in that, and he plays the screenwriter coach, and it was just so funny watching him in this role because like he's like the same dude where he's like loud, screaming F-bombs left and right. I honestly really do love his character.
It's over the top, but it's in a good way.
He's kind of like a meld between like reality and like what's not true too, because he's like I view a certain scene in that movie, not with those two, but like towards the end where I'm like, okay, we're in a different movie now, and he kind of facilitates that.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things that came out of this movie is now like I'll come out of certain movies and be like, that's a Donald Kauffman movie. It's a great film analysis tool.
I mean, this might be the best screenplay of all time, really. If you think about it as intricately as we're trying to.
That's how I feel about this in Synecdoche, New York. That's why those two are like on a Mount Rushmore for me, and I'm like, well, some days I'm feeling this, and some days I'm feeling really mopey, so I like this movie better.
I think this is the best American movie of the last 20 years. Well, I guess it's exactly 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
So
mine would be The Social Network.
Oh, okay. That's fair. That's probably the best of the 2010s.
I feel the disdain growing.
I think it's the best representation of the 2010s. I think it's the perfect 2010s movie.
It really is. Like if you think of something that you had to present to an alien species is like
in 3,000 years.
Yeah, the human experience in the 2010s, The Social Network is definitely a perfect representation.
I'd show him Tenet. So this is how far we've fallen from our society. That's what I'll show him.
God.
So if you guys had to rate this movie, what type of number would you give it?
10 out of 10. I mean, there's no doubt. For me, personally. I mean, there really wasn't. I think it is the best American movie. I think Kauffman is the best American writer. I'm not going to say he's the best writer overall, because there's so many people working now, in Europe especially, but yeah, Kauffman's great. He's my favorite American movie maker in all its facets.
I gave it an 8 out of 10. You know, I guess I struggle to give it a 10 out of 10, because it just doesn't resonate with me super hard, you know, but it is closer to a 9 than it is to a 7.
I admit my personal scale is kind of like that too, where like honestly movies really only max out to like an 8 out of 10 for me until like I can start relating to it, because that gives me like a reason to come back to it. Because if it's just like a perfect movie in terms of like what it's trying to achieve, like I don't know, I feel like I get that out of the first watch pretty well. But if it's like got all these like intricate themes laced through it and it's like relating to me, that's where I'm comfortable to give it a 10. And there's definitely a lot here that I relate to, and not in the sad way. I swear I'm not that awkward. I swear I'm not that awkward around women. I swear.
Well, we can't prove that, but we'll take your word for it.
Alrighty, well, I will wrap it up there. I'd like to thank my guests. I will link them in the description, and they're always a blast to talk to.
Thank you for having us.
Alrighty. Good night, everybody.